Thursday. Let's talk about some Pauper cards on a Thursday. Ooh, okay. All right. Here's not a very good card, but one that I like a lot anyway. It's Lucent Limited for 3 and double white for an enchantment creature elemental. It's a 3/3 flyer. This was I'm pretty positive because it is in Future Sight, and the whole point was coming up with funky ideas that Magic might take advantage of in the future. I believe this is our first enchantment creature ever, which obviously would go on to become a much bigger thing in something like Theros, where there are lots of enchantment creatures, and now they're just kind of a thing you see in lots of decks. Yesterday, was it yesterday? Yeah, it was yesterday. Maybe it was 2 days ago. We saw Chocomog, which is an enchantment saga creature. So we're finding even more ways to innovate on that kind of stuff these days. But this was the original. Pretty cool back in the day that you could have these enchantress style effects, but have a creature out there too. A 3/3 flyer for 5 is a pretty bad rate, but it was cool. It was cool. It was a thing that Magic hadn't done before, and it was in the cool Future Sight frame, and it was a big deal. It was a big deal. I like this card a lot. I've got copies of this card. I don't care if they're 12 cents. I'm never selling them. I'm going to keep them forever. They're worthless, but they're mine, I've always tried to think about putting this in a commander deck, and you just can't justify why you ever would. It's not a good card, but man, yeah. I got to stop on the nostalgia, but it's bad. It's bad. It's like a 1.4. It's that bad. It's an enchantment creature though. Pretty cool. Let's move on to Armored Wolf Rider for 3 and Selesnya. That is also green and white. For a 4/6 Elf Knight. That's all it does. Yeah, it's pretty expensive for this amount of creature. Art looks good. I like this kind of Selesnya style Wolf Rider elf guys who ride these wolves. We've seen a number of those, and I like them all. But as a card, not very good. Not very good. We'll give it a. It's better than. Is it better than Lucent Limited? I don't know. 3/3 flyer versus a 4/6 on the ground. I'll give this a 1.5. It's just barely better. Keeping on to Rupture Spire. It's a land. It enters tapped. When this land enters, you sacrifice it unless you pay 1 mana. But then it can tap for a mana of any color. It's not great, It kind of sucks to essentially pay 2 mana to have this, to play a land, right? Because this card comes into play tap, so that's, if you had an untapped land, that would be a mana you'd get that turn. And then you also have to pay 1. That's probably another land that you got sitting there. So you're paying 2 effectively to put this thing out there. But once it's out there, it's great. Once it's out there, you've got a thing that produces mana of any color. Those are okay. The thing is that in Pauper, there aren't many, if any, real 5-color decks in Pauper. There's like slivers decks that will play a handful of other kinds of slivers in different colors. There's a couple of other decks that are able to filter colors enough that they can play all sorts of different colors for little one-off things, for sideboard pieces or things like that. But generally, you're going to stick to 1 to 2, maybe 3 colors. And there are enough good dual lands for things like that, especially when it comes to like the artifact duels or the basic land type duels that come into play tapped. You find that you'll probably just end up playing those more, that they're easier to get in your deck, they're easier to fetch up. Actually, speaking of fetches, even just the fetches, the Modern Horizons 3 fetches. Those can fetch for 3 different kinds of lands. The new Capenna ones too, the new Capenna fetches that find you another land and gain you a life. I think there's enough fixing in Pauper, and that's not even to speak of something like Prophetic Prism that can filter lands. The conduit, no, what are they called? Conduit pylons? Is it conduit pylons? I think it's conduit pylons. Let's just check to be sure. Conduit pylons. Yeah, conduit pylons. And that filters. I think there's enough stuff that filters in Pauper that you end up playing that the opportunity cost to get eventually a land that taps for any color, you kind of just don't need it. So it's okay, but it's not great. And for that, I think we can give it a 2. Yep, just a 2. Kickoff Celebrations is 1 in a red for an enchantment. It's got Start Your Engines. It's from Ether Drift, where this mechanic started. Start Your Engine says if you have no speed, it starts at 1. And then it increases once on each of your turns when an opponent loses life, and your max speed is 4. So this is like a separate counter, separate tracker that happens that you can't make go away. Actually, there's one card that reduces speed. I don't even think it's in Pauper. It might be an uncommon card, but it's also pretty unplayable. So don't worry too much about it. Basically, the idea is that if your opponent takes damage, you get to keep gaining speed once on each turn that it happens. It can happen on an opponent's turn. It can happen on your turn. So you can get up to 4, and then once you get up to 4, generally there is an additional effect on the card. So what does this card do normally, and then what does it do when you got max speed? When this card comes in normally, when its enchantment enters, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards. We see that all the time. But at max speed, you can sacrifice this enchantment, and creatures and vehicles you control gain haste until end of turn. That's okay. That's all right. Is it enough? Is it all right enough that you would play it over some of the other options? Probably not. Like, the effect is not that big of a deal. I think what is a big deal is that this is an enchantment that does this. So if you are in a red deck or a deck with red in it that cares about enchantments entering the battlefield, or even enchantments being sacrificed, or having an enchantment to sacrifice for a bargain style effect, having this effect on an enchantment isn't too bad. In the same way that like Melded Moxite from Edge of Eternities is an artifact that does this, and then you can sacrifice the artifact to get, I think it's like a 2/2. And it's not a huge deal that you can sacrifice it to get to 2/2. It's more a big deal that it's an artifact that can add to your artifact count for affinity and things like that. So this being an enchantment, I think, is a bigger deal than most of it. Even so, there are other enchantments that do somewhat similar things. There are other enchantments that say when you enters, discard a card, draw 2 cards. And I think those are still maybe a little bit better than this one. The gravy that they have does a little bit more, but it's not terrible. It's not terrible. I think this is perfectly fine. I'll give this a 4.2. 4.2. Next up is Seda Disciple. For a single blue mana, you get a 1/1 Merfolk Wizard, and it's got a couple of abilities on it. For a red mana and tapping the creature, target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and you can pay a green mana and tap it to add 1 mana of any color. So you can kind of filter, but you have to have green to start the filter. These are interesting cards from Apocalypse, where they, it was these Disciple cards that would have abilities from other colors. And I think there were also, what are the Battle Mages from? The Battle Mages also from Apocalypse, or are they from a different set? Plane Shift, yeah, that's a different set for the Battle Mages. But the idea is that you had these cards that could do things in other colors. So if you were playing an Izzet style deck, they didn't call it Izzet back in the day. But if you had a blue-red deck, you could play this guy and you could get this extra ability. If you had a blue-green deck, you could play this guy and get this ability. Or, maybe you were playing again, they didn't have the term at this time, but you could be playing a teamer deck, and this guy gets a lot more value out of it. You have a card that does a lot more stuff with the more colors you play. Because back in this time, I'm pretty sure, you would have... Oh, God, I'm going to sneeze. Nope. Yep. Nope. We'll see. I think I'm over it. You had people playing more single color decks. Maybe they would play 2-color decks. And then I think there were like some people who would try like some 4 or 5 color decks and just see what they could make happen. And sometimes they could make it happen and other times they wouldn't. Fixing was a lot more difficult kind of back in the day. So I like that they made cards like this. And obviously we've seen them go on to make cards, a lot more cards like this that encourage you to be in more colors. So while I like that, Pauper wise, nah, he's like, these effects aren't all that great, and you wouldn't play it. So I'll give this like a 1.7, and we'll keep going. Spellgorger Weird is a 2 and a red weird, as you might have guessed. It's a 2/2 creature, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. It's not bad. It's not bad. This thing can grow out of hand pretty quick. The problem is that it costs 3 mana. We have other kinds of effects like this that are a little cheaper, and some of them even have an ability. And this guy is a vanilla, but he does keep getting big. And that is kind of cool. But I think this effect isn't quite good enough. You see something like Murmuring Mystic, that when you play a non-creature spell, is it a non-creature or is it an instant or sorcery? Either way, like when you play these spells, you get a 1/1 flyer. So the idea that you could make a really big wide board is probably a little better than making a big tall creature, especially a big tall vanilla creature that doesn't fly, that doesn't have trample. He's okay. He's okay. He's weird. He is a weird. He is weird. Yeah, I don't know. He's all right. I'll give him a 3, and that's probably a little too good for him, but we'll just give him that. Dream Prowler is 2 and double blue for a 1/5 illusion. This creature can't be blocked as long as it's attacking alone. Interesting. This is first of all, Richard Kane Ferguson. Good RKF art as always from RKF. He's cool, right? Like it's nice that you could have a creature that, it has to swing it alone, but maybe you have like a Voltron-y kind of thing. I don't know, if you have a Voltron-y thing, you're probably not in blue. 4 mana for a 1/5. Obviously the 1/5 means he's really good at blocking, but he'd also be really good at attacking and eating a block. Like he's not going to die if he attacks, and he doesn't get to use that toughness if he attacks alone and can't be blocked. So I don't know. What are you really getting out of the deal? Unless you're gonna play like a Bogle style Voltron strategy and really get him in there. But at 4 mana, he takes a little while to get out there as well. I don't know. I don't feel great about him either way. I think we'll give him a 2. 2 is probably too good. I'll give him a 1.8. And we'll keep on moving to Nimana Sky Dancer. It is 2 and a black for a 2/1 human rogue. It's got flash and flying. And whenever this creature enters, target opponent mills 2 cards. That's a lot of things. This card does a lot of things. Flash Flyer, 2/1. All those things are solid. And then the opponent milling a card or milling a couple cards is okay. I would think I would like this a little better if it said target player mills 2 cards. So you could do self-mill strategies with this as well. But this is pretty cool, as in, imagine your opponent is playing. I'm trying to think of they're playing some kind of, whether it's Ponder or, even Brainstorm, and they want to keep those cards on top, and you're able to flash this guy in and make them mill those couple of cards that they thought they were going to get and thought they were going to want. That's cool that you can disrupt them in that way. He's okay, but he's just kind of okay, and honestly, that's not good enough for Pauper these days. You need to be better than okay to show up in Pauper. Let's give him a 2.9, maybe. Yeah, I think we'll go with 2.9. That sounds right to me. Jeskai Sage is 1 and a blue for a 1/1 human monk. It's got prowess. It says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And when this creature dies, you draw a card. I think this guy's all right. 1/1s with prowess are okay. In blue, you certainly have the ability to play not lots of non-creature spells. 2 mana isn't the worst. And the idea here is that you make this thing scary enough that you want your opponent to kill it. You want your opponent to spend the removal spell. And when they do, you replace this with a card in your hand. You get to draw an extra card. It's all right. I think this whole package is all right. The problem is he's actually just a little vanilla. He's a little vanilla all the way around. Monastery Mentor is a card that is, Monastery Mentor. Monastery Swiftspear is a card that is banned in Pauper, and that's a 1/2 with prowess, but it has haste and only costs 1 mana, and that thing's a scourge because it comes down earlier, it attacks early, it puts a ton of pressure on the opponent right from the get-go, and then it keeps the pressure up. And this guy, he's got to wait another turn before he can come in. And he doesn't have haste, so you got to wait another turn after that to really start putting the pressure on. And while he does, at least on the surface, feel a lot like a Monastery Swiftspear, when you scratch away at the surface and you see what's underneath, you go, no, I see how this is actually much worse than a Monastery Swiftspear, which is why this is not banned in Pauper, and Swiftspear is. So let's give this guy a 2.4. 2.4, and we will move on to our final card of the day. It's Highway Robbery. It's 1 and a red. For a sorcery, you can discard a card or sacrifice a land. If you do, draw 2 cards. You can also plot this for 1 and a red. Plotting says you can pay 1 and a red and exile this card from your hand, and you can cast it as a sorcery on a later turn without paying its mana cost. Plot only as a sorcery. So, again, we see lots of these red 2 mana, discard a card, draw 2 card kind of effects. This one is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, having the choice to discard the card or sack the land could be useful. Sacking lands is not something you necessarily always want to do. But sometimes, especially if you're a red deck that's playing a lot of cheap spells, maybe you have enough lands. Maybe it's okay that you sack a land and you don't have to go down on cards to you actually go up on cards. That's all right. It's pretty cool. And then also the plotting allows you to pay this on one turn, and then the next turn when you have all your mana available to you, you play this and you get a bunch of cards and you can play them all in one turn. Maybe you have a prowess creature. We just saw a prowess creature, but maybe you have a prowess creature, and now you can play all those things and really pump the prowess creature up to do one big turn of damage. Maybe you are just gathering a bunch of creatures in your mono red deck, and then on the turn that you play this, you're able to swing with all of them because you have some kind of anthem effect that you're able to play, or you're able to pump each of them up in some way. So this card does see some Pauper play. It is not like the best ones of these, but I think in the decks that like it, you'll see 2, sometimes even 3 copies of this thing. It's okay. It's okay. We'll give this like a 5.3. Yeah, I think 5.3. No, it's probably better than that. Let's bump it all the way up to like a 5.9. 5.9, I think, suits it a little better. Oh, why don't we give ourselves one bonus card too? Ornithopter of Paradise. I'm so glad we gave ourselves the bonus card. I like Ornithopter of Paradise. I don't know if it's really Pauper playable, but it's certainly Commander playable. You'll see this all up and down Commander, both Commander sets and Commander decks in general. Ornithopter of Paradise is 2 mana for a 0/2 flying artifact creature that's a Thopter, and it can tap for 1 mana of any color. You took an Ornithopter, a 0/2 flyer, and you took a Bird of Paradise, a 0/1 flyer that can tap for any color of mana, and you had them kiss. You put them together. And this is what you get. You get a halfway decent little flyer. It can block some stuff. It makes you mana of any color, so it's a 2 mana rock in that way. He does a lot of neat little things. It's a great little card. In Pauper, you could play it, but I don't think you really would. I don't see a whole lot of rocks being played in Pauper to begin with. Ornithopter Ornithopter is a 0 mana 0/2 that flies. Like, wow, you can just put a bunch of 0 cost artifacts on the table, and those don't really even see play. They occasionally you'll see them get a little bit of play, but yeah, Ornithopter of Paradise I think just doesn't really rate these days in Pauper, but I take any copy I can get because I certainly put them in Commander decks, especially if you can get the Modern Horizons 2 retro frame one here. Which, look at that. That's such a nice looking card. Remember when artifacts look good? Yeah, I don't know. What do you score this for Pauper? I think you could score this like a 2.8, I guess. Maybe a 2.8. But in Commander, this thing bumps up to like a, I don't know, like a 6.5, something like that. Pretty good card for that. But in Pauper, a little too slow, a little too unimpactful. And so you don't really play it there. But it's not really meant for Pauper. That's okay. Sometimes cards aren't meant for specific formats. Anyway, that is all we have for today. We will catch you next time on Common Knowledge. See you then.